Oh, and welcome to Apropos, the show about closure where we have on a guest and talk about their setup and what projects they're working on. On our panel today, we have Ray,
Hello.
Mia,
Hi.
and I'm Eric. And our special guest is Colin. How are you doing,
Hello.
Colin?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to be
So
here talking to you guys.
I think it's amazing the latency is very low for you being on the other side of the planet.
Yeah, I'm
Not
plugged
just
into
that,
the
but
wall, which definitely helps.
in the future. You're in the future.
You
Colin is
live in the
That's
future.
right.
It's
from
from
Yep.
Wednesday.
from
It's
tomorrow.
it's
It's
already
crazy.
Wednesday here. That's right. Yep. Yeah. Cursive is technology from the future.
Closure is technology from the past, so we're meeting in the middle here.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
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 Yeah, so thanks for joining us, Colin. This is really cool to see you again.
It is. It's been
Um,
a while. Yeah.
it has over a year, right? That was in
hmm Yeah. So the conj and
2024.
heart of closure. Yeah. The end of 2024. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, so I try to make it to a conference every year or two, but it's pretty tricky. It's pretty far. So
Mm.
my
for
wife is
sure.
is Spanish, so occasionally we're in Europe for trips, and then I can sort of combine it with that. But there's not a lot of European conferences happening at the moment, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And nothing down under? Don't have any.
Nothing unless you count Brazil as down under, but it's still pretty far. So it's
Yeah, right. That's Brazil.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, no. So nothing down here. It'd be nice to have one in like Australia or somewhere, but
Uh-huh.
no, not so far.
Hmm.
And I don't think
Is
taking
cl-
on organizing a conference is on my short-term roadmap.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Why?
do
It's
you
not
have
like
a
you're
big
working
group down
remotely.
there?
In New Zealand, no. There's only a couple of so like Daniel Compton is here, and
Mm-hmm.
who I'm sort of in contact from time to time, and there are a few people here, but there's not a lot. There are more people in Australia.
Yeah,
Some friends who work with Clojure in Australia, but again, even Australia's 3.5 hours flight from here, right? So it's
sure.
The reframe crew are all Australian, aren't they?
that's right. Yeah,
There's
yeah.
only one of them, so or maybe it's
Well,
two.
no, no, I think there's a couple of them. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I've spoken to Mike before and had
Yeah.
some dealings with him. Yeah.
Nice.
Awesome.
Okay.
Can we get into it? Can we see your setup?
Yeah. Sure. So I will. It's
While he's getting that set up, if you don't know, Colin created Cursive, which is a plugin for the IntelliJ editor IDE, and I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with that. But
Oh
just in
yeah.
case you're not
just in
putting
case.
two
Yeah.
and two together, yeah.
Yeah.
So I hope we get to see some cool stuff that Cursive can do.
Hopefully. So can you guys see the window there, or is that
Just
showing up
fine,
okay?
yeah.
Just fine.
Hmm.
It's funny
So
calling it a plugin, by the way, Colin. Before you get started, is quite funny because plugin seems like a very small little thing that
Yeah,
just
maybe
adds
I
a little
was.
bit of spell checking or something to the editor. This is
no,
like,
I mean,
no, this is an entire language that's support now.
yeah, well, I mean, so and it is a plugin, right? It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
absolutely correct to call it a plugin, but it is a fairly big plugin, so
Uh-huh.
because
Yeah.
there's a lot to it, but yeah, and actually I've been working on Cursive for more than 10 years now. It's been a long
Oh,
time.
Wow.
wow.
So the Conj 2014 was when I first presented it, and even there I think I'd been working on it for like a year or so. It was working basically.
Yeah,
So.
sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so it's a plugin to IntelliJ. I mean, my background is being a Java developer, and so I was comfortable with IntelliJ. And when I started wanting to use Clojure, I like picking up Emacs again. I used to use Emacs way back in the day when I did C++.
Uh-huh.
But it just wasn't something I was keen to go back to, having used IntelliJ for where the Java support is just amazing. So.
Mm, mm.
And so Cursive originally actually was like a 20% project by an intern at JetBrains and a couple of JetBrains people. But they had an open it was open source and it had been sort of half abandoned basically. And so I asked JetBrains if they would mind me picking it up and turning it into a product. and they were fine with it. And I've been amazed. Like I never actually thought I would be able to make a living making developer tooling for a niche programming language.
Hmm.
That's
It's
great.
fed my family for more than 10 years, so I can't
Wow.
complain. It's
That's
It's
wonderful. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. It is. So this is actually the source code of the Cursor project here. So in terms of what my workflow is like day to day, this is the project that I work on basically. Um, and I'll show you some other projects later because Cursive is actually a fairly unusual project from a Clojure point of view because I mean, there's tons and tons of interop in it, obviously, because I have to interact with the IntelliJ framework, which is like a huge blob of Java, basically. I mean, I looked at it, it's like 4.5 million lines or something. So IntelliJ is open
Mm.
source. The community edition is open source. So um, yeah, yeah. So there's a lot of interop, and also, I would say, so I do use the REPL a lot when I'm developing, but it is not as dynamic a project as most Clojure projects are, basically, because it's this big blob of Java. It's all stateful, it's all
Mm.
mutable, and it's not really designed to be dynamic. So it is dynamic to a certain extent, and I can work with it dynamically a bit. Um, but it's not really a dynamic runtime. So I do pretty frequently have to restart my REPL and restart the whole IDE if I'm changing anything to do with stuff that has to be statically loaded at startup. So if
Mm.
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
working with the indexes or something like that, you can't update those dynamically. You have to restart. So my workflow is probably not as dynamic as most people who are working with Clojure. So my workflow is a little bit weird, but I'll try and show what a sort of standard workflow would be like as well.
Mm.
Hmm.
Mm.
So I guess this is what Cursive looks like. If any for those who use VS Code, it probably looks pretty similar. You have your project view over here and your code here, and you can, of course, what happened there? You can uh, focus on your code, and there are various sort of bits of Chrome around there. You can make all that go away for people who like a more sort of minimal interface as well.
Mm. Mm.
Um, and you can do all the sort of standard things that you might want to be able to do here. I can get some completion here, um, and I can get documentation on things. Let's see, this is all my code, so it doesn't actually have a lot of documentation. Let me find something that actually has some documentation here. Here we go. String join, for example. Um, and one of the really nice things about Cursive, and I think one of the sort of main reasons for choosing Cursive, I think, over some of the other editors, is that the interop with Java is really, really good because it's based
Hmm.
on IntelliJ. IntelliJ is a Java, right? It's really fantastic. So all this stuff um, works sort of seamlessly for Java as well. Whoops, let me put that up there so you can see what's going on. Um, so I can get. Of course, JetBrains code doesn't have a lot of documentation either to it. So I'm trying to find some Java code with some documentation, but I'll find some in a bit and show you. But basically everything sort of works seamlessly. So I can navigate to Java classes very
Oh,
easily.
nice.
I get completion on them, CL Java interop. Everything that works i- in Cursive for Clojure also works for Java. So for example, I can rename this here, and that just works. But I can also rename this Java class,
Oh, wow.
and that renames the Java class and also renames all the usages. You can see this usage down here near the bottom also got renamed.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
s- so all the interop between Clojure and Java and whatever other language, Kotlin or Scala or whatever else you're using,
Hmm.
is really seamless. And that's mostly because I mean, there's a decent amount of work on the Cursive side, but it's a lot of it is just the infrastructure that IntelliJ provides. So I would say one of Cursive's main strong points there is this sort of interop with Java. Um, and And again, this is super useful for me because I'm working with interop all day, basically, day in, day
Yeah,
out.
yeah,
This,
yeah.
so I can, let me show you some of the interop stuff that works here actually. So I can do, uh,
How has the interop changed with 1.12, Colin?
Mm.
so I'll show you that there's a few new features there actually.
Right, right, okay.
Uh, so here we go. So I can create a thing called I'll call it LST because I like one letter variable names unconventionally, but here it is. Um, so Cursive actually does the same sort of type inference as the Clojure compiler does in the editor. So I can see I can get the type of the LST variable there, and Cursive knows it's an array list
Hmm.
there. So I can do so here I get the list of completions of things I have imported, right? So I can get the iterator on my array list, and then uh, Cursive knows that's an iterator, right? Because it knows that list is an array list, and then I can get the iterator, and Cursive knows that's an iterator. But that can actually, you can also use that for completion. So if I say list, so actually, let me show it this way. So if I do my list variable there and then I do it, see, it only shows me what is actually available here on iterator.
Wow.
Oh,
So
sorry,
it's doing the
On
on
type,
array
array
list.
list,
On array
on
it's
list.
array
doing the
list.
type inferencing.
Yeah, in
It's
the
able to
editors.
follow that. That's awesome. Now,
Yeah.
did you write that, or is that something that came baked into IntelliJ?
So I wrote most of it. There's IntelliJ infrastructure that I can use. So stuff like seeing whether types are compatible, seeing whether
Mm-hmm.
one type is derived from another or assignable to another, that sort of thing.
Right. Right.
They have a whole type system in
Right. That
IntelliJ.
mimics the JVM types, right? Yeah.
Exactly, yeah, yeah. But the actual inference, I wrote myself, yeah. So
Hmm.
this is showing, yeah, sorry, right, you're right. This is the methods that are actually on array list because list is an array list. So I can do this. Um, but this is kind of a pain in Clojure because of the prefix notation, right?
Mm.
So it's
Mm.
because you
Uh-huh.
often if I was doing it in Java, I'd be doing like list dot something and then I get the completion. But in Clojure, because of the prefix notation, that's a little bit annoying, right? So, but what I can do is I can say list dot iterator, and then when I complete it, they get swapped around.
Oh,
So,
cute. That's awesome.
Very
Yeah,
nice.
that's a nice little convenience there.
yeah, and then here I can also do the same with iterator, and iterator dot has next. And the nice thing here is I get the completion for iterator, even though iterator isn't actually imported in this namespace at all. So I don't have to have that imported in order
Hmm.
to get this completion because Cursive is doing this type inference and it knows what the type is. So it can show me the completions for this, even though iterator isn't really imported there at all. Um, so there are Clojure forms actually that work better with this with the prefix notation. So I can do oops, sorry, like that. And there it can give me the completion because it has the variable that it knows the type of first, right?
Hmm.
And
Right, right.
and this works sort of with chaining and everything, of course. So I can say, and this is really, really useful for me when when I'm working with the IntelliJ code base. It's absolutely massive, and there's no way I can remember all the stuff. So I
Mm.
can,
I mean, I agree. Like for context, I just as a contrast, I'm like in the Java docs a lot,
yeah,
chasing
yeah.
it down myself. Like what methods do I
Mm.
want, and if I often know a letter or two, but I have to use in browser search. It's just not the same. This would be
No,
really
no.
nice.
And it again because it's all IntelliJ has all this built in, it's all right there in the
Hmm.
let me see if I can
Well, your has next had the Java docs there, so you kind of got it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is no, that won't have a lot either.
You've solved a mystery for me. I worked in a code base once that had a lot of just two piece expressions, but that used an arrow macro, and I couldn't
Hmm.
figure out why. And
Yeah.
I bet that the writer was using cursive,
Yeah,
and
Uh-huh.
yeah, and it makes it so much easier, you know. And I also quite like the style, to be honest, but it's but there's a practical reason for it as well in this case, right? Yeah, so here there are a bunch of IntelliJ classes here, right? So I can I can get the documentation for it, and you know, and the IntelliJ interfaces are absolutely massive, right? So if I go there, there's just this completely humongous Java class. So working with that
Mm.
by hand is really quite a pain, but I can do the same thing here, like element. Uh, and then it just shows me the stuff that's actually on PSI element there,
Nice.
um, which is, yeah, it's really useful. So I use that a lot.
Yeah. And it
Um,
traces all the super types as well and the interfaces it implements. Yeah.
that's right, yeah. And the stuff there, you can implement interfaces very easily. All this sort of stuff is all built in. So that kind of cross-language navigation is really nice in cursive.
Hmm.
It's definitely one of cursive strong points. And I can show you actually. Let me just share a different window here. One sec. I'm just sharing individual windows here because otherwise my screen is a bit big probably.
Yeah. Everyone's got 5K screens now and it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
Still,
let's
it's
try again.
amazing you're streaming over the internet, and we're all
From New
picking it up.
Zealand.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
don't think about it.
Well, it's where all the bunkers
Yeah.
are, isn't it? So I think it's bound to have good internet.
Yeah, that's right. Peter Thiel demands it in his bunker,
Yeah,
so it's
exactly. It's
yeah.
table stakes for bunkers these days. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, when the bombs drop, he's going to want to know.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So that was all the stuff we kind of looked at there. And then there's a bit of stuff here about the new. So Cursive also has good support for the new params tag stuff. So here. So one nice thing I can do in cursive is this is actually I'll navigate there. So this is just a var with some with a vector with some strings in it. I can actually see that from here, so I can just quickly see the
No
definition
way.
of the thing I'm
Nice.
looking at,
Yes.
which is quite nice. So here. Um, I know that this is a vector of strings, but Clojure doesn't, and Cursive could do. I sort of opted for not having too much functionality that's based on stuff that Clojure itself doesn't know, right? But I think
Right,
that
right.
I potentially could add better support, given that Cursive can know that this is or it does know, in fact, that this is a vector of strings, so it could do more sophisticated things there. But it doesn't do that at the moment. So here, what it will tell me is, there are multiple matches for string to uppercase, and it doesn't know which one to use, which is, with the new method syntax, is one of the nice things you can do. So I can actually just say, it's, I want to use this version or I want to use this version, and it will add those. And now it actually knows which version I'm referring to, and when I get the Java doc and whatever, it show it for
Nice.
that overload of the function.
Huh.
Um, and same thing here. So this is saying here, I'm using date new. This one is deprecated, but I can say, okay, so what did we have here? Start for timestamps is a series of longs. So I can go here and I can say, okay, I want the long version. Um, and oh yeah, so the other nice thing that came in 112 is so again this all works for constructors as well. So we had names was some strings. So I'll say we're creating an array list from a collection. Um, and then it's going to tell me here, so this is a function on array list, which takes a predicate, right? And previously, before Clojure 112, you had to actually like reify your predicate.
Mm.
But now they have the SAM conversion, and you can actually just say replace that with the function, and it's actually it's figured out here that I have, my function is actually just calling string as empty. And so it figures out that you can actually just
Wow.
replace that with the method value.
That's pretty
Um,
smart.
That's pretty nice.
Is it a bunch of heuristics? Well, how does that figure it out?
uh, so the thing with developer tooling is, a bunch of it is super interesting, right? There's like 5% or 5 to 10%, which is super interesting, and then there's
Uh-huh.
like 90 to 95%, which is just like huge if statements with every crazy edge case, right? And
Yeah,
a lot of
right.
it is just like, when someone does this crazy thing, which they're going to do, right? At some point,
Yeah.
Yeah,
someone's going
yeah,
to do it. Doesn't matter what it is. Someone will do it
yeah.
somewhere. How
Yeah.
can I do something sensible with that, right? So that there's just a lot of it in there, yeah. But yeah, so it'll ask the same thing here. We're looking for the collection, and then when I convert this, um, then it just actually gives me the var reference.
Mm-hmm.
And if it can't sort of simplify that nicely, then it'll actually just give me a little anonymous function. Um, and this is actually really nice, like because this is actually works with a system called inspections. So if I undo all that there, um, I can actually I can run an inspection by name. And where is it here? Functional interface adapter can be replaced with FN, and I'll run that over this whole project.
Oh. Oh.
Oh,
Oh.
did not find anything to report. Interesting. Should do. This is the functional
Maybe it hasn't been saved or something, Colin. I don't know
the whole project. No, no, it's you don't need to save it. IntelliJ saves automatically and everything
right.
is updated. I don't know why. Oh, I know why. Yeah, it's because so what's happening here is the
Because you have to have the
this
collection first.
yeah, the collection is not resolving, so then
Right.
it's not sure which arity it's using, which
Mm.
overload rather. So hang on, let me just fix
Yeah,
those.
yeah,
Uh, there's all these times when I spend staring at it, and then cursor's
yeah.
almost always right, actually. So it's even though I'm sure it is actually it's not true. It is frequently wrong as well. But so here it actually shows those three cases, and I can go through. But I can just replace do that over my whole project. And
Nice.
so when I first implemented this, I then run it over cursive and fix, like 150 occurrences right off the
Oh,
bat, right?
awesome.
So, um,
That's so I mean this kind of gets me to a question that's kind of been baking as you've been showing me this. You have the enviable position of being able to use your own tool to develop your own tool,
I do,
right?
yeah.
You're so like as your tool gets better, you get more effective at building the tool itself.
Yeah, yeah.
Do
And
you? Yeah, go ahead. Talk about it.
that's the great thing about making developer tooling is I am my own customer, right? So it's but I get it, and again to a certain extent, I don't always feel all the pain that everyone else is feeling
Right.
because Cursive is a bit of a strange project. But yeah, it's definitely true that I do something like this, and I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool, nice. So
Right, and but I mean, you must know a lot of the pains. Like you showed
yeah,
us that you can do, uh, kind of write the form in reverse, where you put the
yeah,
argument first, and then you do dot, and then once it completes, it swaps them back to the correct closure form of it.
exactly,
Um,
yeah.
but those are the kinds of things that you might not see unless you were working in it yourself and you
That's
felt that
right, yeah.
pain.
And I do have a bit of a problem with that at the moment because when I spoke at the Conj at 2024, like a big part of my talk was more and more of Cursive is actually becoming Kotlin code now, and that's because
Oh.
the IntelliJ base infrastructure is moving more towards using Kotlin coroutines for all its concurrency. So IntelliJ is a
Ah.
very highly concurrent system, and they're using Kotlin coroutines for all of that, which are really nice. So it's sort of like core async on steroids, basically, and it's
Mm-hmm.
and they have like cooperative or rather hierarchical concurrency. So you have a
Oh,
bunch of
cool.
coroutines. You cancel the top one, all the bottom ones get cancelled, as all the ones below it get cancelled. So I
Right.
mean, it is really
Erlang.
nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, a little bit Erlang, that's right. But the problem with it is that it only works with Kotlin, right? So it's
Mm.
so there are parts of Cursive that I'm having to migrate from
There's
Clojure back to Kotlin just so I can use the coroutines. But I'm keeping all the tests in Cursive are in Clojure. So I still use it. So there's still a bunch of Cursive that is written in Clojure, and all my tests I think will always be written in Clojure, and that's just purely for dog fooding purposes, just so I can feel the pain.
I was going to ask you that
so
actually.
go
What
ahead.
do you have a project that you develop in Clojure that, or do you only ever work on cursive? You know,
Um,
you
so no, so I do have a few other things. So my website where I do the licensing for Cursive, that's actually
mm,
a Clojure script project that runs
right.
on AWS, so that I can use the Clojure script stuff as well. Um, and and if I'm doing sort of little side projects, I have a bunch of projects that I use for doing customer support, and those are all written in Clojure because the REPL is just a nice interface for accessing the data from the live
Mm,
system, that
mm.
sort of thing. But I don't have a serious project apart from Cursive, mostly because I just don't really have a lot of time for a serious
Sure, sure,
project
sure.
apart from
Yeah,
Cursive.
yeah.
But one thing I would really like to do is I know I've been meaning to do this for the longest time, but it's quite a big project, is to add support for Clojure Dart. Because that has a huge amount of interop as well
Mm, mm.
with Dart. And the IntelliJ support is not quite as good as it is for Java, but there's still a lot you could do there, I think. And that is something I'd like to get to this year. Um, but then I would need a Clojure Dart project just to make sure that I'm actually using it and feeling the pain, basically.
So you
Right.
must have had a project that you were working on when you started Cursive.
Uh,
What made you start doing Cursive in the first place?
so I took a bit of a sabbatical. So my previous job was kind of it was pretty stressful. It was a pretty high pressure job, and I did a lot of highly concurrent Java in that job, and
Mm.
so I'd felt all that awfulness basically, and Clojure seemed like it had a lot of sensible solutions. So I wanted to play around with it. But again, I didn't want to go back to using Emacs, which was kind of really the only option at the time, unless I wanted to take up Vim for the first time out of nowhere, which is probably not advisable. Um, so I picked up this plugin and I just started finding a bunch of problems with it, basically. And so
Mm.
really my first serious Clojure project was actually Cursive itself,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
which is and again, it's a weird project. So my first experience of using Clojure was not typical by any stretch, basically. And every so often, like I say, like the IntelliJ platform is not as dynamic as a sort of plain Clojure runtime. Um, so every so often I'll do a little side project. I'm working on Advent of code or something, and I can work in the REPL and I can just reload everything, and I'm like, wow, this is really nice. This is what people are talking about, because I don't always have that experience working on my own project all the time. Um, yeah, so it is. I've definitely had a strange road to closure, definitely. Um, so let me go back to what do I want to show here. Um, and so I guess one thing actually that I haven't mentioned yet, speaking about REPLs, is that Cursive's main party trick is that all this stuff works without a REPL running.
Mm.
So actually, in all of this
Mm.
demo, I actually haven't had a REPL running at all because Cursive works with static analysis on the code.
Mm,
And
mm.
so you sort of expect that for Java, but this actually works for the Clojure code as well. Let me just share the other project again because this is. So again, this is the Cursive project again, and Um, so yeah, so I can navigate around. I can and you know I can navigate between files. And I can do all this, and this all works without a REPL running at all. And again, this is because Cursive does static analysis over all the code, which is the way it works with Java. Most of the IntelliJ modes don't actually talk to a running system like an LSP or something like that. And the recent IntelliJ versions, they're adding more LSP support just because um, it is a lot of work to develop a full IntelliJ plugin for a language,
Mm,
and it's difficult for people. It's to add support for IntelliJ,
mm,
and LSP
makes
is a
sense.
faster route to doing that. Um, but it's also true that if you do a full integration, you get much better support than you do via LSP. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. LSP allows you to get sort of basic functionality, and I think so. So even at the conj in 2014, when I demoed Cursive, you know, all this stuff like, you know, I can very easily, that's the only place that one's used, but you know, set difference. I can very easily see everywhere in Cursive that set difference is used, you know, and jump to them, and I can, you know, get the documentation and all this stuff. You know, so I would say that the things that are really, really important to me are being able to immediately navigate somewhere, to see where something is used, and also to be able to rename it, right? And LSP does get you those three basic things, right? I think they're the really fundamental operations. Um, but it's definitely you can add a much deeper integration if you do it natively in IntelliJ, but it is a lot more work as well.
The thing that I really like about IntelliJ, I think in terms of like special powers, I think the thing that you've done is a debugger.
Okay, yep, I can show that.
Mm,
Because I think the
Um,
debug, who debug stuff in Clojure? Everyone just uses log lines and stuff like this, but it's really nice to be able to just walk through the debugger. It's really something of a delight to me, that's for sure.
yeah, okay, so let
And
me
when we think about like Colin as the customer, because he's not doing a REPL, uh, so it makes sense to have the debugger be a part of this.
Yeah, and so I do actually use the REPL as well. But it's always been really weird to me because so I was coming from Java and it was really weird to me in coming to Clojure that in order for your editor to work, you had to have all this sort of developer tooling dependencies in your actual project. That was just really strange to me. It didn't seem quite right that, you know, you need nREPL and you know whatever other things you're using if you're using like I don't know CLJ refactor or whatever. You actually need that in your application in order for your editor to work. It always seemed really strange to me. So uh, but I do definitely like the aspect of a REPL where you're building where you're building your application and working with it interactively, and that's definitely, you know, what seems to me to be the main sort of function of the REPL, so that does work well. So hang on, let me just start. I'll actually start a REPL up here. Oop, that one there. So um, and this again, this REPL takes a little while because it's a big project. So and I will look at. All the tests for Cursive are actually in Clojure, and so I can do. I'll show you how the test integration works as well. Once that REPL comes up, because it has to compile all of Cursive just to start the REPL. It's just going to take a minute.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, I kind of
mm.
surprised you with that one.
No, no, it's okay. I can show that. Um, it's doing its thing. It's doing its thing. Okay, so test REPL started. So. Um, So the first thing you might notice there is you can't actually see the ripple, right? So in recent IntelliJ versions, again, this is so let me actually no, let me just get rid of that first. I'll just load that file in. Um, Uh, so now when you evaluate things in the REPL, you actually get this interactively, and the result actually comes back in a little sort of interactive tree in the editor.
That's cool.
Uh, yeah, and so I'll demo a bunch of stuff with that later. Actually, I have another project that shows a bunch of stuff you can do with that now. Um, but yeah, so I can load this in, and um, I can now like run all the tests in this in the REPL, right? And so it will go ahead and run the tests. And again, the tests take a little while. And Cursive gives you these nice little gutter icons here showing whether the different assertions actually passed. Um, uh,
Nice.
yeah, which is kind of nice. So it's still running all those tests again. I should probably have picked a smaller namespace to demo this on. Um, and actually, I made a fatal mistake there. I did not start this REPL in debug mode. Hang on, let me just start up again in debug mode. It shouldn't have to recompile everything now, so it'll be a bit quicker.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's right. This is the live demo effect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, all right, so the REPL started. I'll load it up. And so this time I'll just run this particular def test in there. So yeah. And actually, so the having the REPL with this interactive testing flow is really nice for me because the tests for IntelliJ actually start essentially a headless version of IntelliJ, so they're quite
Oh my
heavy to
God.
start up. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. But then once it's actually all started
Oh,
up, then I can just rerun that last test action, and it's actually quite fast, right? But the
Wow.
startup is definitely, it takes like 30 seconds to get going every time.
mm-hmm.
Um, so, say we think we have a bug here. Actually, let's think, what are we doing here? Uh, so we're testing slurp backwards here, right? So um, let me inclusive actions par edit, and we're looking for slurp backwards. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here for slurping backwards. Um, and Uh, is a string e6. All right, going. So that there's two main cases. I might be slurping something in a string, or I might be something slurping in a collection. This is the pure PSI approach. So I can just put a breakpoint here, and then actually the thing is there's no executable code on that line. The debugger is a little bit finicky, and because it's based on JDI, the Java Debugger interface, and that's actually very heavily line based, because Java code is quite heavily line based. So if I put a breakpoint here, it's trying to find the executable code at that line, but there actually isn't any. But there is on this line here. So now when I rerun the last test, it'll actually just break in there, and
You can see all the
and
locals.
yeah, you can see all the locals. That's right. I can step through it. I can step into things here, and I can step into Java from there,
Oh,
step
that's
back
nice.
out, and it's all totally seamless. And this is really really useful. Like I think a lot of people working on systems where Clojure is like an interface to Java really like this. I
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
use it a
yeah.
lot just for my Clojure code as well. For pure Clojure code, there are lots of REPL alternatives that you can use as well. Um, but I think that sort of seamless navigation, moving between Clojure and Java and back again is really, really nice. It's definitely something. I mean, I use it all the time, right? So,
Hmm.
um, and yeah, you get all your locals, and IntelliJ has an incredibly sophisticated debugger, so there's all sorts of stuff you can do. If I look at the breakpoint, there's just actually I don't know if you can see that. It's probably popped
We
up in a
could
little
see it,
red.
yeah.
Ah,
The
you
thing I
can.
like
Okay.
about it, Colin, is you can put closure expressions in your breakpoints. You
Yeah,
know,
that's right. Yeah, so you can say, only stop when, let's see what we have here. Um, so they're kind of a big function actually. So I can say, only stop when my what's the variable called? Sorry, the slip E. Uh, oops. So I'd only stop with the Slurpee as a PSI element, and these can be like totally arbitrary expressions. You can write
Mm-hmm.
whole programs in there, and only stop on certain conditions.
Mm.
And there's a lot of stuff in that IntelliJ allows you to do. You can like go down to the level of marking specific object instances and saying stop when this object instance has this type or has this state or and it's really useful. Like one thing that REPL debugging doesn't allow you that this does is if you're debugging like concurrent problems, things like that. So if I'm debugging something in the indexes in IntelliJ, firstly, I just don't understand the code, right? It's massive and it's not my code.
Right.
Figuring out how that works is just impossible. So I can debug, I can put breakpoints in the IntelliJ code, I can put breakpoints here, I can set a breakpoint that gets invoked when an exception is hit, which is usually how I start. Actually, if I'm
Mm-hmm.
like diagnosing some problem, I look at the exception, I put a breakpoint on that exception, and then it just takes me there when it happens. So
So, I'm curious. Inside of IntelliJ and Cursive, so you're able to put this closure code. Is it like making a like Java dot functional dot predicate or something, or some like how
Mm.
are you interfacing between them?
So for the expressions that I'm putting in the breakpoint, for
Yeah.
example, no. So what Cursive does is it actually goes out to the JVM that's being debugged, and actually, so what it does is it builds up a little closure function that
Uh
implements
huh.
IFN,
Uh
and
huh.
it basically compiles that using closure and the debug thing, and then that becomes your predicate, basically. And I think I wrap a little. It's a long time since I worked with this code, but I think I wrap a little predicate around it. But it
Yeah.
actually it just compiles a little bit of closure code into an IFN and then
Uh
calls
huh.
that. Um,
Cool. Cool.
and so the debugger and closure is quite slow, and so actually I spoke about this at the Conj at 2015. There's a whole thing there if people are interested in more details. But due to the way that closure compiles to bytecode, it's actually quite hard to debug closure sometimes, and so it is quite finicky. I would say the most common problem is that if you are again because it's quite kind of line based, so. Um, if you are you're sort of working with code in the REPL, you're evaluating code in the REPL, your code sort of moves around in your source file. And so the lines in the source file very frequently don't actually correspond to the lines and the compiled bytecode in the JVM that you're debugging. So generally, I recommend always actually reloading the entire namespace before you actually start debugging, because then you're sure that all the source code lines up with what's actually compiled in the JVM. If you don't do that, then things can get very surprising. But it can also be quite slow sometimes, and that's just because of the way that Clojure compiles to classes. It's very difficult for me to figure out, like, this function invocation here, what is the class of the function that or say my function here, slip backwards, right? What is the class of that function in the JVM? It's actually really difficult to know that because of the way that Clojure compiles. And JDI really wants you to know those things to
Mm-hmm.
be able to efficiently say to it, put the breakpoint in this class at this line. And so I end up having to do these horrible scans for all of the classes in the JVM in order to just give it this massive list of classes that it might be, and that actually makes it sometimes quite slow. Um, and so I'm planning to do another round of improvements to the debugger. It's been a while since I worked on it, but there's a few things that annoy me, so I'm sure they annoy other people. And I think there's a few improvements because IntelliJ actually has over the last few releases has really improved the infrastructure for the debugger as well. So I suspect there's probably more I can do there now. Um,
It's
but
great
I'll show
stuff, man.
you. Yeah, yeah, it is really nice. There's um, So let me go back to where I was. if I tests here before, trying to think of test. Um, so and actually one thing that is also is really nice, going back to a more closure sort of side of things, is you can do a lot of the being able to search for things. You can do that for keywords as well, which is really nice. So I can say like, where is this keyword used everywhere in my project? Um, which is quite nice. And it will actually also let me find, if I go to say here. So here, execute, I'm destructuring this. So execute is actually
Ah,
sort of a variable, but also sort of a keyword, right? It's a variable that's destructured
Right.
from a keyword. So if I try and find the usages of that, it'll say, are you talking about the variable or are you talking about the keyword? So I can find the usages of the variable, and that's just the local variable here, right? But I can also, if I want, I can find the usages of the keyword, and that then shows me everywhere in the project that that keyword is
Oh.
used, including
Hmm.
the places where it's actually a local var that's destructured from that keyword. So if
my
I go
God.
here, this
Wow.
is a local var, but it knows that it's related to that keyword. Um,
Wow. That's
and
really a cool detail there.
and that's really useful. And I can actually, if I'm really keen, I can rename the keyword to like execute to, for example, and that'll probably take a little while. I always give a preview for these things because in Clojure you're never really 100% sure. It is quite dynamic, although most Clojure code in practice is actually surprisingly regular. But and then I can do that refactor, and so now this destructuring is now execute to, the local variable is execute to. If I find
And
the
then all those
keyword,
maps that had it literally in there. Oh, look
yeah,
at that. Oh,
there we
wow.
go, execute to. And that's super useful, right? If you're doing a lot of sort of work with it, well, I mean, we all do lots of work with keywords, right? It's just
Yeah,
so
yeah.
that yeah, that's really nice. And you can do I actually don't use spec a lot, but I do have some specs in the project if
Now,
you want to.
just a question, just for
Yeah.
clarification. If
Hmm.
that if you had two different maps that are kind of different, like they represent
Hmm.
different entities, but they both had execute,
Yeah.
would it be able to distinguish the two, or would it have changed both of them?
It would change both of them because there's no way to know, right?
Right.
The only
No,
way
there
that you
isn't.
could know is, so let's say I do this oh sorry. I want to rename that back to execute. And then it gives me this preview, right?
Uh huh.
And so I can go through, case by case and say, I don't want to do this one, I don't want to do this one, I don't want to do this one. And but you would have to do that because you're the only one that knows,
Yeah.
right? That if you're using namespace keywords, then that's better, right? Because
Right.
then presumably you have kind of semantic names for your two executes. I have like, my REPL execute and my process execute,
Right.
and they're namespace keywords, and then it can distinguish those fine. Um, if you're just using bare keywords, then I mean, that's why they invented namespace keywords, right? Because
For
you
sure.
do get you do get this kind of ambiguity. So,
Hmm.
um, so Cursive can't really do anything automatically with that, but it does give you sort of quite nice features for doing it manually.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. All right. So let me share a
I
few more
think it's
projects.
also just to want to point something out.
Hmm.
The code still lines up. So you made the keyword longer. You added a
Yeah.
two, but
Hmm.
somehow it made the white space work out so that they're still aligned.
By
All the
magic. That's
values.
right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
good eye, that man. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it does. So actually, that's one thing we could talk about is Cursive actually has a really nice par infer implementation, and I actually use that all the time. So down at the bottom here, I can pick whether I want no structural, which if I'm some sort of base animal, or I can have par infer or par edit. And I actually use par infer, sorry, all the time. I really like it. Um, so so basically, if I'm, you know, well, let me just actually I can just show some examples down here. So here I can move that line in and
Right.
out, and all the brackets just get updated.
Right.
And it's actually it's really nice because a lot of Clojure code is actually fairly line based, right? And in
Hmm.
theory, it's kind of uh, it's all sort of nested expressions, but realistically, most code is actually pretty regular. People like to lay it out nicely, and so you can actually, I can just take that out of the diff just by outdenting it. I can put it back in by indenting it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's really really nice. So that automatic paren balancing is I really like it. People think of it as a beginner thing, but yeah, I don't want to be remembering like 40 keystrokes just to be able to manipulate my code, and
Uh-huh.
I can still use the power edit commands here, so I can still raise that. I can still you know slurp and bath and whatever. Um, but a lot of the time, I'm like, oh, God, really, do I have to remember how to do that? I'll just delete that line and it'll just work.
Yep.
So I still, just from a sort of mental overhead perspective, I actually really like it. And the power infer implementation in Cursive is actually pretty slick. It does have some quirks that I'm planning to fix shortly, but mostly I like. And I've heard from multiple users that they stay on Cursive just because of the power infer implementation.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Because why would you want to go back? It's really
Hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if you, I guess, power edit is sort of like touch typing, right? Like, once you've got over the 6 months of pain or whatever of getting it into your muscle memory, then yeah, it's kind of second nature. But I mean, I guess I kind of did that, but I never really got to the point where I'm like, there's, 20 commands or whatever. Do I really remember how to do them and figure out what the right sequence is? I just found it
Yeah.
much easier.
I think there's
Uh,
also something about working with other people. I mean, because, yes, in the moment, if you're editing code, it is nice to have these keystrokes and it just like does the right thing. But
mhm.
sometimes you open a file and it looks okay, it looks
hmm
fine, but really the indentation is a little out of sync with the parentheses,
Yeah.
and you're not noticing it because normally they're in sync,
Yeah.
and parenfer just makes sure they're always in sync.
Yeah.
And
And one of the biggest complaints about the original power for it to work actually has to have everything balanced according to the indentation, right?
mhm.
And so what the original implementation of power did was if you opened a file that wasn't like that, it would make it like that. And that would sometimes
Uh-huh.
break people's code, right? Or
Right.
relay out people's code. And if there's one thing I've learned about code formatting is people hate it when you do that, right? So
Hmm.
you open a file and it changes. What's up with that? It's
Yeah, yeah.
so let me just
How are you doing for time, by the way, Colin?
I'm good. Yeah, it's like 8 in the morning here, so I'm just starting my day. So as long as you guys are um good. So so here we go. We can always rely on Clojure Core to have inconsistent indentation. And there it is. So
Hmm.
So what I did in Parenfer and Cursive, instead of actually changing it, what I do is I just mark where the indentation is inconsistent and rely on the user to fix it. So Parenfer actually does not work here now. Um,
Oh, so it knows
but
that
oh,
form, just leave it alone,
well, at the moment
or
it
the
works at the
whole
file
file.
level. Yeah, I want to make it work at the form level because really I should be able to work on this form here and this form and this form here.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, I shouldn't be prevented from working on my entire file just because that one particular
because
function
there's a
is
stray
inconsistently indented.
space. Yeah.
Yeah, or a couple of them there actually by the looks of it. But yeah, so having that marked is quite nice, and so it's actually not letting me edit this because it's in a dependency, right? But I can if I do it in my own project, it'll give me a little warning saying,
Mm-hmm.
just so you know, parent is not working here because the indentation is inconsistent. Um, all right, so let me yeah, I'll stop that here and I'll just share another project quickly. Da, 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 da. So can you guys see that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Start Ripple. So as I mentioned earlier, let's close that actually. So in recent versions of Cursive, the so you can get sort of you get your sort of basic REPL results in line, but then you also get these sort of more complicated ones where you have big data structures. You can actually just go through them interactively. Actually, and that's actually in the editor there. It's embedded in. And one thing that's quite nice is you can actually have multiple things here. So I could um, so I can have this one open and I can have this one open at the same time, which is actually really nice sometimes if you're working on two different data structures, you can have them open and compare them and whatever alongside each other. So it's quite nice having those persistent and sitting around in the editor until you dismiss them. I use that quite a bit. And but Cursor also has it uses tagged literals quite a lot to customize things that come back from the REPL. So you can actually get a diff of two data structures right in the editor. And it does that by returning a tag literal that Cursive interprets. And then you actually get, so this is, it's inline in your editor, but it's actually, it's a full diff view. You can, highlight lines or words or whatever. Um, you can pop that out of the inlay if you want to have it in a separate window. So being able to sort of diff data structures and things like that is actually really nice, right in the editor. And this was something I demoed at the Conj in 2014, so it's been in Cursive for a year or so now. So you can actually, using these tag literals, you can actually customize how data that comes back from the REPL is displayed. So if I return this tag literal here, I get this. So I see I'm returning this thing saying a presentation. It has some text with a color red, and I get this red hello world here. Um, and so what that's actually doing, again, if you look at it under the hood, what this is actually bringing back is just this tag literal. So cursive/node, and then it just has a data structure after it, which is the data that will be displayed. And cursive interprets that data structure and does special things with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that example's fairly simple, but I can do this one here. And then I actually get this expandable thing where I build up this interactive, like a sort of little interactive form with my data in the editor. And again, like Cursive knows nothing about any of this stuff. It's just interpreting the data that's sent back from the REPL. So in your application, you can return whatever you want, and Cursive will show those, will display those, and you can actually mix them with standard closure data as well. So here I've got a couple of like completely custom nodes here, and then also some data
Some
that I
regular
showed before.
maps.
Regular maps, right? Some more actual data there, which I can open up and go through. Um, and so those maps are kind of verbose, and so I just developed a couple of really just for this demo. I just developed a couple of functions, but it's like literally, four or five functions just to return those map shapes basically, um, and then you can start doing. Oops, where are we? Down here. You can start doing quite neat things very, very quickly, So that this looks like comments, it's styled like a comment in the thing, and you can show all sorts of things in different styles. Um, and right, you can make things look like actual code elements as well if you want to be doing that. This looks like a comment, this looks like a keyword. And then you can start doing even fancier things with those where you can have things. So I styled these as links just to sort of make it obvious that you can do something with them, but I can say, go there and it will take me somewhere. So you can actually start building up things where you can have interactive views on your data So I
Hmm.
can navigate to a Java class there. Um, and if you're really keen, you can that actually you won't be able to see that because I'm only sharing a window, but that opens my browser and navigates to a web page. Um, so right, so if I'll probably so I can also create nodes that'll that'll actually evaluate things. So this node here, it has this presentation, evaluate and return the past parameters, and it looks like a link. And the action when the user does something to it is eval, and it will eval this var. And what the var will receive actually is just this entire data structure here. And so you can put all sorts of extra stuff in there for the interactive node to actually do things with. So this one, for example, will just actually return that data. So what you're getting back is the data that was actually passed to that eval, and
Mm.
this one here will print it out. And it's sort of again, so these are just sort of the primitives, but I'll show you an example of how you can actually use that. So if you're using Mali for your data validation, for example, Mali has some nice features for actually for printing out errors, right? So if you get a Mali error, it will actually print out this nice thing that shows you, this is the value, this was the error, it should have been a string, and you get a little bit more information here. And they have all these different sorts of errors that you can get, and they're all nicely
Hmm.
formatted. Um, And so again, I developed a couple of functions, oops, sorry, which again just create these node structures. And this is basically code that I copied from Mali to do that formatting, and then I just modified it. Instead of printing in the document structure, I create these inline presentation nodes. Um, and so now I can set, this is actually the value that was being validated. And you can sort of navigate around the value. You can see the error. You can see what the schema should have been. You can navigate to the Mali doc if you want to. So you can actually get these quite nice explanations in line of errors that you get in your program.
So do you package some of these things, Colin? So like,
So I actually haven't, and I really should. There's some, and so I was working with Timothy Prattley a while ago now actually, and then I just got distracted with other stuff. So that it would be nice to have some of the stuff actually packaged so you could publish it from libraries.
hmm,
So you can, in Cursive, you can actually define custom commands that are just things that get executed in the REPL. And it would be really nice to be able to package those with these kind of like data displays for the kinds of data that you have.
hmm.
And again, like Cursive knows nothing about Mali. It's just that the application is formatting the data in the way that Cursive can interpret, and then you get these sort of interactive displays. So you could do this with totally custom data from a particular application of any sort.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
these back.
But
So
obviously, it's nice if you've got these kind of common packages and libraries that you know.
yeah, so this is on GitHub. It's on the Cursive
Yeah.
IDE GitHub, so you can just get the helper functions, and
Mm, mm,
but
mm.
you can definitely play around with it. So sorry, where you go?
No, sorry, I just remembered something. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Um, so there's a slightly more complicated example here, and this is sort of like REPL debugging, right? So,
Mm,
if
mm,
you have this, so this uses a thing called scope capture, which is a macro that essentially captures local variables, and you can use that for debugging when you
mm,
evaluate. So if I load this in, I have this sort of complicated function here, and if I evaluate this, I get 390, but it's kind of difficult to figure out why, right? So I can
mm,
um, uncomment that spy macro there, and then um, now when I evaluate this, I get this data from spy saying that it's captured a bunch of locals that I can then use, and then so if I this is the data that Scope Capture uses behind the scenes, where it captures all these local variables, and you can
Mm.
actually then just define them as vars, and then in your function here you can go through and just say, okay, well, so A is 23 and B is 26, A plus
Mm.
3 is 26, and I can go through here and this is inc X so you can actually go through and just sort of because so what that has basically done is it's defined all these local variables as vars in this namespace so that when I evaluate Y, there's actually a var called Y, but it has the value that was captured from that local.
Right,
Um,
right, right.
yeah. So you can just sort of go through and actually debug your code really, really nicely. Um, but it's a little bit fiddly to use. So you can actually, this is actually an example from the scope capture docs here. So it's a have assigned function for calculating the distance between 2 points. And it's this kind of fairly hairy function there. Um, right, so I've done that. So if I evaluate this function, I'm getting 0, so that's obviously wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I uncomment the spy function here, um, and now when I evaluate this, then I start getting, so it's actually captured some data from that evaluation. And you can actually, you can go and you can see the data that it's using there. And so what this does is it just takes that data and actually creates this little interactive view of it. So you can say,
Right, right.
execution point 2, this is the data that it was capturing. You can jump to where that data was captured from. And again, that's navigating, so that will go out. It'll just get the data from the metadata on the var. It knows where it
Mm.
is, and you can jump right to it. You can def all the captured vars from that so that you can go back and evaluate them. And then using that, it's actually, you can see quite easily if you're evaluating, you're like, oh, well, hang on, you know, those values are not quite right. And of course, the bug here is that that should be P2,
Should be
which Gustav
P2.
actually shows you because it shows that P2 is
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
used. And yeah, you're pretty sure it should be, but it's kind
Yeah,
of
yeah.
cheating. But so you can build these interactive views over custom data, which I think is actually really nice. Um,
I've
Yeah, it's
actually got a
great.
drop, and
okay,
we are. Oh, and Eric also says that he has to drop, so we are a little bit
okay,
over. We usually try to keep this to around 60 minutes. So,
okay, sure, yeah.
um, but there's
Yeah.
there's just like there's so much.
There is, yeah. I mean, I could go on and on, but it's yeah. See, well, I hope you got a bit of a feeling of what it's like to use cursive anyway, and maybe some of the things they're a bit different, I guess, that to other Clojure environments.
Yeah, it has a lot of features that I didn't know about. So this was a great little tour. Thank you so
Great.
much.
No worries, my pleasure. Yeah, it's probably my fault to be honest. I need to make some videos, I think.
Uh, I
No.
mean, there's a lot, so I'm sure that we could have you on again at some point as well. It's been a
Yeah,
been a real treat. I have to run, so
Okay, all
I'll
right.
wrap up.
yeah,
Talk to you later, Mia.
But, bye.
Cool.
Thank you
yeah.
so much.
See you.
So it's just the cursive fans left now, Colin.
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, that's really good. I think we probably should wrap it up, but
mhm.
I'm obviously I'm a fan of it. I love what you've done, so I appreciate it. But it's nice that other people who are using Vim or Emacs can get an appreciation of the extra features. So, and I really
Yeah, it's
appreciate
always
it.
yeah, it's always nice to see people's kind of workflows, I guess, and
Yeah,
how
yeah,
they actually use
yeah,
their tooling. I think is there's a lot of tooling out there, but it's often hard if you're just looking at a GitHub repo about the tooling. It's hard to sort of imagine how people actually use it. I think so.
yeah,
So I think
exactly.
having people demo it is really really valuable.
Yeah, wonderful. All
Okay,
right,
well, thanks so much for having me.
it was an absolute
That was
pleasure.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah, as
thank
it
you
was
very
great to
much.
talk to you, right? All right,
Yeah,
thank
take
you.
care, mate. We'll see you soon.
See ya. See ya.
Okay, bye.